The courtroom was thick with tension, the air heavy under the hum of old light. Grieving parents sat frozen, their faces etched with unimaginable pain as the 18-year-old defendant took his seat. Darius Hill, accused of ending the lives of two beloved sisters in a quiet neighborhood. But as the judge entered and all rose, Darius didn't flinch. He smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips that sent a chill through the room. It wasn't fear or regret. It was almost like amusement, as if the heartbreak around him was just a passing show. He thought his youth would shield him, that he'd outsmart the system, but hidden evidence was about to unravel everything, and that smile would soon vanish under the weight of justice. Stories like this remind us that justice always finds its way. If you believe in accountability, subscribe now and tell us what you think below. This is how it all began, in a peaceful suburban street where no one expected darkness to creep in. The sisters, and Emily and Madison Carter, were the heart of their family. Emily, at 21, was the steady one, studying to help others as a nurse, always looking out for her younger sibling. Madison, just 16, brought the laughter, her energy lighting up every room. They shared dreams, late-night talks, and simple joys like walks in the park. Their home on Ridgewood Lane felt safe, surrounded by friendly neighbors. But someone close by harbored hidden resentment, watching from afar. And one fateful night, everything shattered. It started with small things, the kind of everyday moments that build a life without anyone noticing. Emily Carter had always been the anchor for her family, especially after their father passed away from illness a few years back. At 21, she balanced her nursing studies with a part-time job at the local pharmacy, often coming home late with stories of patients she'd helped. Her smile was warm, the kind that put people at ease, and she had this quiet strength that made her seem older than her years. Madison, her 16-year-old sister, idolized her, copying her style, seeking her advice on everything from school crushes to future dreams. The two were inseparable, sharing a bedroom filled with posters of their favorite bands and stacks of books they'd read together. Their mother, Sarah, worked long hours as a teacher, relying on Emily to keep things running smoothly at home. It was a simple life on Ridgewood Lane, where the biggest worries were things like forgotten homework or weekend plans. But beneath that calm surface, tensions were simmering in the neighborhood, unspoken grudges that no one saw coming until it was too late. Darius Hill lived just 3 houses down, an 18-year-old who kept to himself most days. To outsiders, he seemed like any other young man, tall, athletic, with a casual demeanor that blended into the suburban backdrop. He attended the local high school with Madison, though they weren't close friends. Neighbors remembered him as polite enough, helping with yard work or waving hello, but there was always something distant about him, a way he observed people without fully engaging. Investigators would later piece together that Darius had developed a fixation on the Carter sisters, born from a mix of envy and rejection. It began innocently, perhaps a crush on Madison that went unreturned, but it twisted into something darker over time. He watched their house from his window, noting their routines, the way Emily's car pulled in after work, or how Madison laughed on the porch with friends. No one noticed the growing resentment, the way small slights built up in his mind like storm clouds. The sisters, oblivious, continued their lives, planning a family trip for the summer, dreaming of brighter days ahead. The night that changed everything unfolded like any other evening in late spring. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the maple-lined street. Emily was home first, kicking off her shoes and starting dinner, while Madison texted friends from her room upstairs. Their mother was at a school event, expected back late. Around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang, a sound so ordinary it didn't raise any alarms. Madison, assuming it was a neighbor or perhaps a delivery, called down to Emily to answer it. What followed was a sequence of events that would haunt the community for years. Darius stood at the door, his expression neutral, claiming he needed to talk about something from school. Emily, ever trusting, let him in, offering a glass of water as they sat in the living room. The conversation started light, but tension crept in. Words exchanged that escalated into anger. Investigators later reconstructed the scene from evidence, painting a picture of betrayal and sudden conflict. The house, once filled with warmth, became a place of chaos, where trust turned to tragedy in mere minutes. As the clock ticked past 9:30, the neighborhood remained blissfully unaware. A few houses away, families watched television or prepared for bed, the hum of daily life drowning out any distant sounds. Inside the Carter home, the confrontation had spiraled, leading to actions that ended the sisters' promising lives. Darius, in a moment of unchecked emotion, made choices that shattered the fragile peace. He moved quickly after, trying to cover his tracks, wiping surfaces, straightening furniture, as if order could erase what had happened. But in his haste, he overlooked the small details that would later undo him. The front door clicked shut behind him at 10:04 p.m., and he slipped back into the night, heart racing, but convinced he'd escaped notice. Meanwhile, the house fell into an eerie silence, the lamp in the living room still glowing softly, a half-finished meal cooling on the counter. It was a scene frozen in time, waiting for the morning light to reveal the heartbreak hidden within its walls. The next day dawned bright and unassuming, but worry spread quickly when Emily didn't arrive at her pharmacy shift. Co-workers called the house, then Sarah, who rushed home from work. She found the door unlocked, an unusual sign that set her pulse racing. Stepping inside, the air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Her calls for her daughters echoed unanswered through the halls. Upstairs, the discovery was devastating. A sight that would forever alter her world. Police were summoned immediately, their sirens cutting through the morning calm, drawing neighbors to their windows. Officers secured the scene, their faces grim as they noted the evidence of struggle without overt signs of forced entry. It pointed to someone familiar, someone the sisters had welcomed in. Whispers spread along Ridgewood Lane. How could this happen here? Who could betray such trust? The community, once tight-knit, had now eyed each other with suspicion, the illusion of safety crumbling like fragile glass. Detectives arrived swiftly, their notepads ready, questions probing the edges of every conversation. They interviewed Sarah first, her voice breaking as she described her daughter's routines, their kindness, the absence of any known enemies. Friends of the sisters came forward, sharing stories of their vibrancy. Emily's dedication to helping others, Madison's infectious joy. But amid the grief, patterns emerged. A few mentioned Darius, recalling how he'd linger near the sisters at school events or neighborhood gatherings. One classmate remembered a tense exchange weeks earlier where Madison had politely turned down his advances. It was a thread, thin but telling, that investigators began to pull. They canvassed the street, collecting statements and, crucially, security footage from nearby homes. One camera, angled just right, captured a shadowy figure approaching the Carter house that night, hands buried in pockets, hood pulled low. The timestamp matched the window of tragedy, and though the image was blurred, it was enough to spark deeper scrutiny. As the investigation deepened, the weight of evidence started to build like layers of an unbreakable case. Phone records were subpoenaed, revealing messages that painted a clearer picture of intent. Darius's digital footprint showed searches for ways to avoid detection, subtle but incriminating. Neighbors provided alibis that didn't hold up under questioning, timelines fracturing with each new detail. The detectives, seasoned in unraveling such deceptions, felt the net tightening. Yet through it all, Darius maintained a facade of normalcy, attending classes, chatting with friends as if nothing had changed. It was this calm that unnerved those around him, a mask that hinted at deeper arrogance. The community held its breath, waiting for answers, while Sarah clung to memories of her daughters, vowing to see justice served. Little did anyone know the next revelation would come from an unexpected source, a single message that would crack the case wide open. By evening, as the sun set on that fateful day of discovery, the house on Ridgewood Lane stood cordoned off, yellow tape fluttering in the breeze like a warning. Officers worked through the night, cataloging every clue, their flashlights piercing the darkness. The smile Darius would later show in court was nowhere to be seen yet. Instead, there was only the cold reality of loss. But in that quiet aftermath, the first hints of accountability began to emerge, a promise that the truth, no matter how hidden, would eventually surface and bring light to the shadows. Those first hints of accountability came in the form of a neighbor's hesitant knock on the detective's temporary command post, set up in a nearby community center. Mrs. Elena Ramirez, a retiree who lived directly across from the Carters, had been too shaken to speak earlier that morning, but now, with a cup of tea trembling in her hands, she shared what she'd seen. It wasn't much, a young man lingering near the sisters' driveway a few evenings prior, his posture tense as if waiting for something. She described him as familiar, someone from the block, though she couldn't place the name right away. Detectives noted it down, are cross-referencing with school records and local addresses. It led them straight back to Darius Hill, whose family had moved to Ridgewood Lane just 2 years earlier. As the pieces connected, the investigation shifted from broad sweeps to focused scrutiny, with teams poring over social media profiles and school interactions. The community, still reeling, began to whisper about possible motives. Jealousy over friendships, perhaps, or unspoken rivalries that had festered unnoticed. Sarah Carter, meanwhile, sat in her sister's home nearby, surrounded by photo albums, clinging to images of Emily and Madison's smiling faces as a shield against the growing void. Diving deeper into the sisters' lives revealed a tapestry of warmth and promise that made their loss all the more heartbreaking. Emily, with her gentle determination, had been on track to graduate from nursing school in just a few months. Friends recalled how she'd volunteer at local clinics, bandaging scraped knees or comforting the elderly with her steady presence. She dreamed of specializing in pediatric care, often joking that Madison would be her first patient once she started practicing. Madison, full of youthful spark, was a star on her high school soccer team, her laughter a constant echo during practices. She loved writing poetry, filling notebooks with verses about dreams and adventures, and shared them only with Emily during their late-night sisterly chats. And their bond was the envy of friends, a perfect blend of guidance and fun, where Emily taught responsibility and Madison infused joy. Neighbors often saw them gardening together or hosting backyard barbecues, their home a hub of light in the neighborhood. It was this everyday beauty that investigators highlighted in their reports, underscoring how the tragedy had stolen not just lives, but the future of an entire family unit. Sarah's stories painted them as irreplaceable, two young women whose kindness touched everyone they met, leaving a hole that no amount of justice could fully mend. As the day wore on, the investigation uncovered subtle threads linking Darius to the sisters beyond mere proximity. School friends mentioned casual encounters, Darius joining group hangouts where Madison shone, his eyes lingering a bit too long. One girl remembered him asking pointed questions about the Carters' schedules, disguised as idle curiosity. It painted a picture of obsession masked as friendship, a slow buildup that escalated without warning. Detectives interviewed Darius's own family, who expressed shock, describing him as a quiet teen who spent hours on his computer, rarely causing trouble. But beneath that facade, digital forensics teams were already at work, sifting through deleted files and browser histories that hinted at darker interests. Searches for conflict resolution gone wrong, ways to handle rejection. The neighborhood, once a place of open doors, now locked up tight, with parents holding their children closer. Sarah, in her grief, found solace in community vigils, where candles flickered in memory of her daughters, a collective mourning that fueled the drive for answers. Yet, even as support poured in, the weight of unanswered questions pressed down: why someone so young could harbor such resentment toward lives full of light. The turning point came late that afternoon when a forensic team processed the scene more thoroughly. Amid the careful collection of fibers and traces, they found a small item overlooked in the initial sweep, a keychain charm shaped like a soccer ball that belonged to Madison. It was discovered in the grass near the back door, as if dropped during a hurried exit. Lab tests would later confirm fingerprints on it, but for now, it served as a poignant reminder of the lives interrupted. Investigators expanded their search, knocking on more doors, gathering timelines that placed Darius without a solid alibi for the critical hours. His story of being home studying didn't align with cell phone pings showing movement toward the Carter house. Whispers turned to outright suspicion as word spread, and Darius, sensing the shift, began to isolate himself further. The detectives, methodical in their approach, built a timeline board in their office, pinning photos and notes that wove a narrative of intent. Sarah watched from afar, her heart aching, wondering how trust could lead to such betrayal, and vowing to honor her daughters by seeing the truth fully revealed. By nightfall, the investigation had gained momentum, with warrants issued for Darius's devices. The digital trail was compelling, messages to friends boasting about handling business, vague enough to evade immediate notice, but damning in context. One exchange, a timestamp days before the incident, showed frustration over a perceived slight from Madison, words laced with anger that hinted at deeper turmoil. Psychologists consulted on the case noted patterns of entitlement, where rejection festered into something uncontrollable. The community rallied around Sarah, bringing meals and sharing memories, but the undercurrent of fear lingered. How well did anyone know their neighbors? Emily and Madison's friends organized a memorial at the school, planting flowers in their honor, a small act of defiance against the darkness. Detectives, piecing it all together, prepared for the next step, a formal interview with Darius. The air in the station buzzed with anticipation, the promise of confrontation looming like a storm on the horizon. As the hours ticked into the next day, the focus sharpened on Darius's background, revealing a young man who had navigated challenges quietly. Raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs, he excelled in academics but struggled socially, often feeling like an outsider among his peers. This isolation, experts suggested, might have amplified his fixation on the outgoing Carter sisters, turning admiration into envy. Interviews with teachers painted him as intelligent but detached, someone who masked insecurities with a confident front. One educator recalled him excelling in debates, always arguing from a place of certainty, as if admitting weakness was unacceptable. This trait, investigators noted, mirrored the composure he'd later display. Meanwhile, Sarah sifted through her daughter's belongings, finding letters and drawings that captured their spirits. Emily's neat handwriting planning futures, Madison's doodles full of whimsy. It fueled her resolve, turning personal loss into a quest for clarity. The neighborhood, united in sorrow, held its breath as the case unfolded, each new detail a step toward understanding the unthinkable. The investigation's rhythm built steadily, with lab results trickling in to strengthen the case. Trace evidence from the house matched items from Darius's room, subtle links that couldn't be ignored. Detectives prepared a strategy for questioning, aiming to pierce his calm exterior without tipping their hand too soon. Community meetings addressed the growing unease, counselors offering support to process the collective trauma. Sarah spoke at one, her voice steady despite the pain, sharing how Emily and Madison's light would endure through memories. It was a moment of raw emotion, binding the neighborhood closer. As the net closed, Darius's world began to shrink, friends distancing themselves amid rumors. The detectives, reviewing footage again, spotted a telling detail in the neighbor's camera, a brief glance toward the lens, as if aware of being watched. It hinted at calculation, a mind that believed it could outmaneuver fate. In the quiet of the following dawn, as mist hung over Ridgewood Lane, the first cracks in Darius's story appeared during an informal chat with police. He spoke evenly, denying involvement, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when the keychain was mentioned. It was the visual echo of that night, a small token of Madison's life, now a symbol of the unraveling truth, glinting under the interrogation room lights like an unspoken accusation. That informal chat in the dimly lit interrogation room marked the beginning of a deeper unraveling as detectives leaned in with calculated patience, their voices steady, like the ticking of a clock. Darius sat across from them, his posture straight, hands folded on the table, as if this were just another school meeting. He repeated his story smoothly. Home all night, studying for exams. No reason to be near the Carter house. But when the keychain was placed before him, its tiny soccer ball charm catching the overhead light, a subtle shift occurred. His fingers twitched, eyes narrowing for a fraction of a second before he regained composure. The detectives noted it, a crack in the facade, and pressed gently about his relationship with Madison. He claimed they were just acquaintances, nothing more, but his words carried an edge, a defensiveness that hinted at hidden layers. Outside, the station hummed with activity, and officers cross-referencing alibis while Sarah Carter waited in a nearby room, her face drawn from sleepless nights, clinging to the hope that this young man she barely knew held the key to understanding her unimaginable loss. The air grew heavier as questions circled back to that fateful evening, each probe like a thread, pulling at the edges of his carefully woven narrative. Reconstructing the night everything changed required piecing together fragments from witnesses, timelines, and the silent testimony of the house itself. It had started innocently enough, with the sun setting over Ridgewood Lane in a blaze of orange and pink, families settling into their evening routines. Emily had returned from her shift at the pharmacy around 8:45 p.m., her bag slung over her shoulder, humming a tune as she unlocked the door. Madison was upstairs, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone while texting friends about weekend plans. Their mother, Sarah, had texted them both earlier, on reminding them to lock up before bed since she'd be late from her meeting. The sisters exchanged light banter via messages, Emily suggesting they watch a movie later, Madison replying with emojis of popcorn and hearts. The house felt alive with their energy, the kitchen light spilling out onto the driveway, a beacon of normalcy in the quiet suburb. No one could have predicted how quickly that warmth would be extinguished, and how a single decision to open the door would invite in a shadow that altered everything forever. Neighbors later recalled the evening as unremarkable, a dog barking in the distance, the faint sound of laughter from a backyard gathering. But inside the Carter home, the ordinary was about to collide with the unforeseen. Around 9:27 p.m., the doorbell chimed, cutting through the sisters' casual evening like an unexpected note in a familiar song. Madison, lounging on her bed, called down to Emily, who was in the kitchen preparing a snack. Assuming it was a friend or perhaps a late delivery, Emily wiped her hands and approached the door, peering through the peephole before opening it with her usual welcoming smile. There stood Darius, his expression neutral, hands in his pockets, mumbling something about needing to discuss a school project with Madison. It wasn't unusual. They'd crossed paths before, in group settings, and the neighborhood fostered that kind of casual drop-in. Emily, ever polite and trusting, invited him inside, offering him a seat on the couch while she called up to her sister. Madison bounded down the stairs, curious but unalarmed, her ponytail swinging as she greeted him. The conversation began lightly, talk of classes, mutual friends, But tension simmered beneath the surface, words turning sharper as old grievances surfaced. Investigators would later surmise from evidence that rejection played a role, a perceived slight that ignited deeper frustrations. The living room, once a space of comfort with family photos on the walls and soft cushions, became the unintended stage for a confrontation that escalated beyond control, leaving behind echoes of what could never be undone. As the clock edged toward 10 p.m., the neighborhood outside remained oblivious, porch lights flickering on like stars in the growing dark. Inside, the situation had spiraled, actions born of heated emotion leading to the heartbreaking end of two vibrant lives. Darius, in the aftermath, moved with frantic precision, attempting to restore order, straightening pillows, wiping down surfaces, as if neatness could mask the chaos. He overlooked the small oversights, like the charm that had fallen from Madison's keychain during the struggle, now lying in the grass outside like a forgotten whisper. The house fell into a profound stillness, the television murmuring faintly in the background, a glass of water abandoned on the coffee table. He slipped out the front door at 10:04 p.m., pulling his hood up against the cool night air, his steps quickening as he melted back into the shadows of the street. A neighbor's security camera captured it all in grainy detail. The approach, the lingering presence, the hurried departure. Timestamps that would later serve as silent witnesses. Back in his own home, Darius tried to resume normalcy, washing up and retreating to his room, convinced the night would fade into obscurity. But the silence in the Carter house screamed of absence, a void that would soon draw the world in. The discovery came with the dawn, when Emily's absence at work triggered a chain of concerned calls. Sarah, rushing home, felt a chill as she turned the key, the unlocked door a harbinger of dread. Her voice echoed through the empty rooms, growing frantic with each unanswered call. Upstairs, the scene was one of frozen tragedy. Emily near the hallway. A Madison in her room, evidence of a betrayal that shocked even the arriving officers. They noted the lack of forced entry, the signs pointing to someone known, invited. Bloodstains marred the carpet, a stark contrast to the sisters' colorful lives, and detectives methodically documented every detail, their faces etched with quiet resolve. Sarah collapsed outside, supported by neighbors, her world fracturing into before and after. The community awoke to sirens and flashing lights, whispers spreading like wildfire. How could this happen to such kind souls? Investigators sealed the scene, yellow tape cordoning off the yard, while forensic teams combed for clues that would bridge the gap between suspicion and certainty. It was a night that had stolen futures, but in its wake, the pursuit of truth began to stir, a slow-burning light piercing the gloom. As word spread, the emotional ripple extended beyond Ridgewood Lane, on touching friends and extended family who gathered to mourn. Vigils sprang up, candles illuminating photos of Emily and Madison, their smiles a poignant reminder of lost potential. Sarah shared stories through tears, Emily's dream of healing others, Madison's boundless curiosity, fueling a collective determination for answers. Detectives reviewing the security footage enhanced frames that captured Darius's distinctive gait, a match that elevated him from person of interest to prime focus. Phone records were pulled, revealing a message from Darius to Madison just before the visit. "Can I come over? Need to talk." Her affirmative reply sealed the invitation, a digital thread tying him to the timeline. The investigation gained urgency, warrants expedited, as the weight of evidence mounted like building blocks toward accountability. Yet in the quiet moments, Sarah wondered about the fragility of trust, how a familiar face could harbor such shadows. The mini-climax of that reconstruction came during a late-night briefing where detectives laid out the sequence on a whiteboard, arrows connecting dots from invitation to departure. It was clear, no random act, but a targeted betrayal born of personal turmoil. Community leaders called for calm, emphasizing unity in grief, while psychologists analyzed the patterns of youthful impulsivity gone awry. Sarah, finding strength in her daughter's memories, vowed to see the process through, her presence a quiet force in the unfolding drama. As the evidence solidified, Darius's world began to constrict, his earlier confidence waning under the scrutiny. The night everything changed lingered in the air, a haunting prelude to the confrontations ahead. And in the evidence room, that small soccer charm sat under protective glass, its shine a visual echo of Madison's spirit, now a beacon guiding the path to justice. The beacon of that small charm illuminated more than just the path forward. It symbolized the unyielding pursuit of clarity in a case shrouded by betrayal. As days turned into a tense week, detectives delved deeper into Darius Hill's world, uncovering layers of a young life marked by quiet struggles and unspoken resentments. His mother, a hard-working woman juggling 2 jobs, spoke of him with a mix of pride and worry. How he'd always been independent, excelling in school but retreating into solitude after his father's departure years earlier. Classmates described him as sharp-witted, often winning arguments in class debates, yet distant, as if an invisible wall separated him from true connections. This isolation, psychologists noted in their preliminary assessments, could foster intense fixations, turning casual interactions into something far more consuming. Investigators reviewed his school records, finding notes from counselors about minor conflicts, hints of frustration when things didn't go his way. Meanwhile, Sarah Carter navigated her grief by organizing a community fund in her daughter's names, channeling pain into purpose, ensuring Emily's dream of helping others and Madison's love of creativity lived on through scholarships and local programs. The neighborhood, still buzzing with hushed conversations, began to heal tentatively. But the undercurrent of questions lingered. What drives someone so young to shatter lives so completely? Parallel to the emotional undercurrents, the forensic analysis progressed with meticulous care, each test result adding weight to the growing case file. Lab technicians confirmed the fingerprints on the charm belonged to Darius, a direct link that tied him irrefutably to the scene. Blood traces, carefully swabbed from the house, matched samples taken during routine checks, though details were kept under wraps to preserve the investigation's integrity. Detectives expanded their digital sweep, examining Darius's online activity. Social media posts that revealed subtle envy toward the Carter sisters' close-knit bond. Comments laced with sarcasm about perfect families. One deleted post, recovered through forensic software, alluded to feeling overlooked, a digital echo of the resentment that had built over months. Sarah, attending a support group for families touched by loss, shared how such revelations brought a bittersweet clarity, validating her instincts that something had been amiss in the neighborhood's seemingly calm facade. Friends of Emily and Madison contributed too, recalling instances where Darius hovered at the edges of gatherings, his presence polite but persistent, now viewed through the lens of hindsight as warning signs missed in the moment. The case file thickened, but a testament to the thoroughness that would ensure no stone remained unturned. Confronting Darius formally became the next pivotal step, arranged at the police station under the watchful eyes of legal advisors. He arrived with his mother, her face lined with concern, as he took a seat in the interview room, maintaining that same composed demeanor that had unsettled neighbors. Detectives started softly, reviewing timelines and alibis. But when they presented the enhanced security footage, his figure clearly approaching the house, his responses grew clipped, evasive. He claimed it was a misunderstanding, perhaps a quick visit for homework help, but inconsistencies piled up like unanswered calls. The message logs were laid out next. His text to Madison, her welcoming reply, followed by a cryptic note to a friend hinting at something big. His explanations faltered, a bead of sweat betraying the cracks in his calm. Outside, Sarah waited with a victim's advocate, her hands clasped tightly, drawing strength from memories of her daughter's resilience. The interview stretched into hours, each question peeling back layers, revealing a young man who believed his intellect could outpace the evidence. Yet, as the session wore on, the weight of facts pressed in, turning confidence into quiet deflection. The emotional toll on the community manifested in subtle ways, from increased neighborhood watches to heartfelt tributes at the local park, where flowers piled up in honor of Emily and Madison. Sarah found solace in letters from strangers, stories of how her daughter's kindness had rippled outward. Emily assisting a classmate with studies, Madison cheering on teammates during games. These anecdotes painted a fuller picture of lives rich with potential, making the loss feel even more profound. Investigators, sensing the case's sensitivity, are consulted with experts on youthful behavior, exploring how unaddressed emotions could escalate into irreversible actions. Darius's background came under further scrutiny. A history of minor school incidents, brushed off as typical teen friction, now reevaluated as precursors. His mother defended him tearfully, insisting on his good heart, but the evidence spoke louder, bridging gaps between suspicion and substantiation. Vigils continued, candles flickering against the evening sky, out a collective prayer for peace amid the storm. Sarah, speaking at one such gathering, urged forgiveness not for the act, but for the community's healing, her words a bridge between pain and progress. As the investigation neared a critical juncture, a search warrant for Darius's home yielded pivotal discoveries. Clothing fibers matching those at the scene, a journal with entries venting frustrations toward the sisters. It was a window into a mind grappling with rejection, pages filled with crossed-out thoughts that hinted at planned confrontations. Detectives cataloged it all, their reports noting the deliberate nature, dispelling notions of impulsivity alone. The neighborhood reacted with a mix of shock and resolve, parents discussing safety with their children, fostering conversations about trust and boundaries. Sarah immersed herself in advocacy, joining groups that supported families in similar situations, transforming her grief into action. Friends remembered the sisters' laughter during summer barbecues, now bittersweet echoes that fueled the drive for accountability. The case, building like a crescendo, prepared to shift from shadows to the stark light of formal charges. Each piece of evidence a step toward closure. The mini-climax arrived during a late afternoon briefing where the lead detective outlined the airtight narrative. Invitation, escalation, aftermath, all corroborated by data and testimony. In it was a moment of quiet triumph amid sorrow, affirming the system's ability to uncover truth. Community leaders praised the thoroughness, while Sarah reflected on her daughter's enduring legacy, vowing to keep their spirits alive. Darius, facing mounting pressure, began to withdraw further, his earlier assurance fading as reality set in. The process, though grueling, promised a path to resolution, honoring the lives lost. In the days that followed, as charges loomed, the focus turned to the courtroom ahead, where facts would face scrutiny. Sarah held a photo of Emily and Madison, their smiles frozen in time, a reminder of why the fight mattered. The evidence, now compiled, stood ready to speak for those who could no longer. And in the station's quiet halls, that soccer charm remained, its gleam a visual echo of unbreakable bonds, shining steadily as the case marched toward its inevitable reckoning. That inevitable reckoning began to take shape in the weeks following the discoveries, as the weight of compiled evidence transformed suspicion into something far more concrete. Detectives, armed with warrants and a growing file of corroborating details, turned their attention fully to Darius Hill, scheduling a more intensive follow-up interview that would test the limits of his composure. He arrived at the station looking every bit the unassuming teenager, jeans and a hoodie, on his expression neutral, as if this were just another errand. But beneath that surface, the investigators sensed the undercurrents of unease, the way his eyes darted briefly to the one-way mirror before settling. They reviewed the footage together, frame by frame, the grainy images enhanced to reveal a figure whose build and gait matched Darius's own. He leaned back in his chair, offering casual denials, claiming the person in the video could be anyone, just a coincidence in a neighborhood full of similar young men. Yet, as questions delved into his whereabouts that night, his answers grew vaguer, laced with deflections that only heightened the detective's resolve. Sarah Carter, informed of the developments through updates, felt a mix of anguish and determination, her thoughts drifting to how Emily's protective nature and Madison's trusting spirit had left them vulnerable to someone they barely knew. The room's atmosphere thickened, on each query a step closer to piercing the veil of denial. Unraveling Darius's connections to the sisters required sifting through layers of everyday interactions that, in hindsight, carried subtle hints of discord. School records showed he shared classes with Madison, often sitting nearby, engaging in group projects where his contributions were sharp but his demeanor watchful. Friends recalled moments at lunch or after school events where he'd insert himself into conversations, on his interest in the sisters bordering on persistent. One peer mentioned a school dance months earlier where Darius had asked Madison to join him, only to be politely turned down. She'd laughed it off as friendly, but he'd walked away with a tightened jaw, the rejection lingering like an unspoken shadow. Emily, ever the guardian, had noticed his hovering and advised Madison to keep things light, dismissing it as typical teen awkwardness. Our investigators pieced these anecdotes together like a mosaic, revealing a pattern of fixation that escalated from admiration to resentment. Sarah, reflecting on her daughter's journals found during the house search, read entries about that quiet guy down the street with a mix of curiosity and caution, words that now echoed with tragic foresight. The community, still holding vigils, whispered about these revelations, wondering how small oversights could lead to such profound heartbreak, if their collective empathy fueling calls for greater awareness in their once tranquil suburb. The digital trail proved even more illuminating as forensic experts combed through Darius's devices, recovering deleted messages that painted a clearer picture of intent. One thread exchanged with a distant online acquaintance vented frustrations about feeling invisible amid the Carter sisters' close circle, words tinged with envy over their perfect lives. Another search history entry, buried deep, explored ways to resolve conflicts discreetly, queries that aligned chillingly with the timeline of events. Detectives presented these during the interview, watching as Darius's responses shifted from casual to calculated, his fingers tapping the table in a rhythm that betrayed inner turmoil. He insisted on misinterpretations, claiming the messages were jokes or exaggerations. But the timestamps didn't lie, placing digital footprints right before the night in question. Sarah, in her quiet moments of reflection, imagined her daughter's final evening, the trust they extended so freely now, a poignant reminder of innocence lost. Neighbors, grappling with the news, organized safety workshops, turning grief into proactive steps, while the media began to circle, their reports careful to honor the victims without sensationalizing the pain. It was a delicate balance, one that highlighted the human cost behind the headlines. Physical evidence from the search of Darius's home added undeniable layers, with items like a jacket bearing faint stains that lab tests linked back to the scene through fiber analysis. Hidden in a drawer, a notebook contained scribbled thoughts, ramblings about fairness and slights that mirrored the resentment building in his messages. Investigators noted how these entries grew more intense in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, a written record of emotions spiraling unchecked. Should during questioning, Darius glanced at the presented pages, his face paling slightly before he recovered with a shrug, dismissing them as private vents. But the detectives pressed on, connecting dots from the charm's fingerprints to the clothing matches, each piece eroding his defenses. Sarah found strength in community support groups, sharing stories of Emily's compassion and Madison's vibrancy, transforming personal sorrow into a shared narrative of resilience. The neighborhood's fabric, I once torn, began to mend through these connections, with parents discussing emotional health with their teens, fostering dialogues that might prevent future shadows. As the interview extended into the evening, the atmosphere in the room grew charged, with Darius's initial poise giving way to moments of hesitation. He asked for water, his voice steady, but his hands betraying a slight tremble as he sipped. Detectives circled back to the security footage, playing it on a loop, the shadowy figure's movements syncing too perfectly with his own to ignore. He countered with alibis from friends, but follow-up calls revealed inconsistencies, timelines that overlapped awkwardly with the evidence. It was here that the first admissions surfaced, not full confessions, but acknowledgments of being near the house that night, spun as innocent visits gone wrong. Sarah, updated later, felt a surge of complex emotions, anger at the betrayal, sorrow for the lost potential on all sides, yet a steadfast belief in the process. Media coverage intensified, with reporters gathering outside the station, their questions echoing the community's thirst for understanding. Vigils evolved into memorials, with artwork and poems honoring the sisters, a creative outlet for collective healing. The turning point came when detectives revealed the message logs in full, including that cryptic note to a friend. Watch what happens next. Darius's eyes widened briefly, the mask slipping as he stumbled over explanations, the words hanging in the air like an unintended admission. It was a crack that widened the case, prompting calls for legal counsel and shifting the dynamic from inquiry to impending charges. Sarah, holding photos of her daughters, whispered promises to them in quiet moments, vowing their light would outshine the darkness. The community rallied with fundraisers, channeling energy into positive change, while experts weighed in on the psychology of such events, emphasizing early intervention. The evidence, now a formidable stack, stood as a testament to thorough pursuit, bridging grief with the hope of resolution. In the aftermath of that grueling session, as night fell over the station, Darius was escorted out under advisement, his mother's worried gaze following him. The process had exposed vulnerabilities, turning a familiar face into the center of a storm. Sarah reflected on the sisters' unbreakable bond, a source of enduring strength amid the unfolding truth. And in the evidence locker, that notebook lay open to a final crossed-out page, its ink a visual echo of unspoken regrets, fading under the harsh fluorescent glow as the case pressed onward. The case pressed onward with relentless momentum as the revelations from the notebook and interview propelled detectives toward a formal arrest warrant, and their paperwork a meticulous chronicle of betrayal and loss. In the days that followed, Darius Hill found himself under increasing surveillance, his daily routines shadowed by unmarked cars and subtle inquiries among his peers. He maintained an outward calm, attending classes and helping his mother with chores, but those close to him noticed the changes. A shorter temper, eyes that avoided direct contact, as if the weight of scrutiny was beginning to press down. Investigators, meanwhile, cross-verified every detail, consulting with prosecutors who nodded approvingly at the airtight assembly of evidence, from digital trails to physical matches. Sarah Carter, immersed in her advocacy work, channeled her energy into speaking at local events, sharing how Emily's nurturing spirit and Madison's joyful curiosity inspired her to push for community programs on emotional awareness. The neighborhood, still healing, organized walks in memory of the sisters, on paths lined with ribbons in their favorite colors, a quiet rebellion against the darkness that had intruded. Each step forward in the case felt like a tribute, honoring the lives that had been so abruptly dimmed by choices rooted in unchecked resentment. Delving into the psychology behind the events became a key focus, with experts brought in to analyze Darius's patterns, offering insights that painted a portrait of a young man wrestling with isolation and perceived injustices. Reports highlighted how small rejections like Madison's gentle dismissal at the school dance could fester in a mind prone to rumination, evolving into a fixation that blurred lines between fantasy and action. These assessments weren't excuses but explanations, helping the community understand the why amid the overwhelming how. Sarah found these discussions bittersweet, reminding her of Emily's own interest in helping others through understanding human behavior. A dream cut short but echoed in these very conversations. Friends of the sisters contributed personal stories, Madison's poems about friendship, Emily's notes on kindness, adding emotional depth to the case file. Media coverage grew, with respectful segments focusing on the victims' legacies rather than sensational details, prompting national discussions on youth mental health. Darius's mother, torn between loyalty and reality, sought counseling herself, grappling with the signs she might have missed in her son's quiet demeanor. It was a collective introspection, turning personal tragedy into a catalyst for broader awareness and prevention. The arrest came swiftly on a crisp morning 2 weeks after the pivotal interview, officers arriving at the Hill residence with measured professionalism, their knocks echoing through the still-sleeping neighborhood. Darius opened the door, his expression a mix of surprise and resignation. Shia's handcuffs clicked into place with a sound that seemed to reverberate down the street. Neighbors peered from windows, some whispering prayers, others shaking their heads in disbelief at how a familiar face could be tied to such heartbreak. He was led away calmly, no dramatic resistance, just a glance back at his mother, who stood frozen on the porch, tears streaming silently. Sarah, notified by phone, felt a surge of complex relief, justice inching closer, to yet the void left by her daughters no less vast. The community reacted with a hushed solemnity, flowers appearing at the Carter home as symbols of support. Prosecutors moved quickly to file charges, emphasizing the premeditated elements gleaned from messages and journal entries, building a narrative of intent that left little room for doubt. It was a turning point, shifting the story from hidden shadows to the public arena, where truth would face its ultimate test. In the holding cell, Shia's paperwork processed, Darius sat quietly, his mind likely replaying the sequence of events that led here: the invitation, the escalation, the hurried exit under the cover of night. Investigators reviewed the case one final time, ensuring every thread was secure, from the security footage's timestamps to the charm's fingerprints. Sarah visited the sisters' gravesite that afternoon, placing fresh blooms and whispering updates, her voice steady with the promise of accountability. Friends gathered in small groups, sharing laughs over old photos, keeping Emily and Madison's spirits alive amid the legal churn. The media, respecting boundaries, highlighted stories of community strength, interviewing locals about the bonds that endured despite the pain. Darius's legal team prepared defenses, focusing on his youth and background, but the evidence loomed large, a formidable barrier to any easy dismissal. The neighborhood, forever changed. I began initiatives like buddy systems for teens, fostering the trust that had been so painfully breached. As news of the arrest spread, it ignited a wave of reflection across wider circles, with online forums buzzing about the fragility of suburban safety and the importance of open dialogues. Sarah appeared in a local interview, her poise a testament to her daughter's influence, advocating for empathy without excusing actions. The case file, now transferred to the district attorney, I included victim impact statements, poignant words from friends describing the ripple effects of loss, from empty soccer fields to unfinished nursing dreams. Darius, in preliminary hearings, maintained his not guilty plea, his voice even, but the courtroom air carried the weight of impending scrutiny. Community leaders organized forums on conflict resolution, turning the tragedy into teachable moments, while Sarah found unexpected allies in other families who'd faced similar sorrows. It was a tapestry of healing woven from threads of grief, each strand strengthening the resolve to move forward. The mini-climax of that arrest day culminated in a press conference where the lead detective outlined the key evidence without revealing sensitivities, affirming the system's commitment to thoroughness. Applause rippled through the gathered crowd, a nod to the tireless work behind the scenes. Sarah watched from home, a small smile breaking through her tears, feeling her daughter's presence in the pursuit of fairness. Darius, transported to a holding facility, faced the reality of confinement, his earlier confidence tempered by the clank of doors. The process, though far from over, offered a glimmer of closure, honoring the light Emily and Madison had brought to the world. Preparations for trial began almost immediately, with both sides gearing up for what promised to be a closely watched proceeding, should the courtroom set to become the stage where facts and emotions would collide. Sarah held on to mementos, a locket with the sisters' photos, drawing strength for the road ahead. And in the quiet of the evidence room, the journal's final page remained, its crossed-out words a visual echo of paths not taken, blurring softly as the case file closed for the night, ready for the dawn of justice. The dawn of justice broke slowly over the ensuing months, as preparations for the trial of Darius Hill transformed the quiet suburb of Ridgewood Lane into a focal point of national attention. Prosecutors meticulously built their case, weaving together the threads of evidence into a narrative that left no room for ambiguity. The security footage, the incriminating messages, the journal entries that revealed a mind consumed by resentment. Darius, now held in a juvenile detention facility due to his age at the time of the incident, and spent his days in structured routines, his legal team arguing for leniency based on his youth and lack of prior record. But the community saw it differently. Vigils for Emily and Madison evolved into rallies for accountability, with Sarah Carter at the forefront, her voice steady as she recounted her daughter's dreams in interviews and community meetings. The media descended respectfully, their stories highlighting the sisters' vibrant lives rather than the sensational details, prompting broader conversations about trust and hidden struggles in everyday neighborhoods. Darius's mother, isolated by the scrutiny, found solace in private support groups, wrestling with guilt over missed signs while clinging to hope for her son's redemption. It was a period of waiting, charged with anticipation, where grief and resolve intertwined like vines reclaiming a forgotten path. The courtroom selection process added another layer of tension, and with jury pools carefully vetted to ensure impartiality amid the case's high profile. Potential jurors were questioned about their views on youth crime, their responses revealing a spectrum of opinions, from those who believed in second chances to others hardened by the tragedy's details. Sarah attended these preliminaries quietly, her presence a silent reminder of the human cost, often clutching a small photo of Emily and Madison smiling on a sunny day. Prosecutors rehearsed their openings, emphasizing the betrayal of trust, the invited guest who turned a home into a place of irreversible loss. Darius's defense countered with experts on adolescent brain development, painting him as a product of circumstance rather than malice, though the evidence's weight made such arguments feel like whispers against a roar. Neighborhood friends of the sisters testified in depositions, sharing anecdotes of their kindness. Emily helping with homework, Madison organizing charity drives. That underscored the profound void left behind. The air in legal offices buzzed with strategy, each side anticipating the emotional battlefield ahead, while Sarah drew strength from letters of support, transforming her pain into a quiet force for change. As the trial date approached, the psychological profile of Darius became a central element, with reports delving into how isolation and rejection could spiral into destructive choices. Experts testified in pretrial hearings about patterns of fixation, drawing parallels to other cases without diminishing the uniqueness of this tragedy. Darius himself underwent evaluations, his sessions revealing a young man, articulate yet detached, speaking of regrets in abstract terms that hinted at deeper turmoil. Sarah, reflecting on her own family's dynamics, wondered aloud in support circles how such shadows could grow unchecked, her insights fostering discussions on early intervention. The community responded by implementing school programs on emotional literacy, honoring Emily's nurturing spirit and Madison's openness. Media coverage shifted to these positive ripples, featuring stories of teens inspired to seek help, turning a dark chapter into seeds of prevention. Darius's legal team pushed for a plea deal, but prosecutors held firm, committed to a full airing of facts that would honor the victims' memories. It was a delicate dance of justice, on where preparation met the raw edges of human emotion. Opening arguments set the stage in a packed courtroom, the air thick with hushed expectancy as the judge called the session to order. The prosecutor began with a vivid recounting of that fateful night, the doorbell's chime, the welcoming smiles, the swift descent into chaos, painting Darius not as a monster, but as someone who chose betrayal over resolution. Visual aids flashed on screens, timelines, message logs, the security footage that captured his hurried exit. Darius sat stoically, his eyes fixed forward, a far cry from the casual demeanor of earlier interrogations. The defense followed, urging the jury to consider context, youthful impulsivity, unaddressed emotional needs, framing the events as a tragic mistake rather than premeditated harm. Sarah, seated in the front row with supporters, felt her heart clench at the retellings, memories of her daughters flooding back like waves. The reporters scribbled notes outside, their dispatches capturing the trial's emotional undercurrents, while the community watched live streams, debating the balance between mercy and accountability. It was an opening salvo that gripped the room, setting the tone for revelations to come. Witness testimonies unfolded over days, each one adding emotional depth to the factual framework. Neighbors described the peaceful evening disrupted, in their voices steady, but eyes glistening as they recounted the siren's wail the next morning. Forensic experts detailed the evidence chain, the charm's fingerprints, fiber matches, blood traces, their explanations clinical yet poignant, underscoring the irrefutable links. Sarah took the stand with quiet dignity, her words painting portraits of Emily's compassion and Madison's joy, tears falling as she spoke of the unbreakable sisterly bond now severed. While the courtroom fell silent during her testimony, jurors leaning forward, the weight of loss palpable. Darius's reactions were subtle, a bowed head, averted gaze, hinting at the facade's slow erosion. Cross-examinations tested resolves, but the core narrative held, bolstered by digital experts who decoded the message's intent. Outside, vigils continued, candles symbolizing hope amid the trial's intensity, while Sarah found momentary peace in community embraces, her resolve unyielding. The defense mounted its case with equal fervor, calling character witnesses who spoke of Darius's intelligence and potential, teachers recalling his academic promise before isolation took hold. Psychologists elaborated on developmental factors, suggesting external pressures amplified internal conflicts, urging empathy without excusing actions. Darius himself testified briefly, his voice even as he expressed sorrow, claiming the event spiraled unintentionally, though his words rang hollow against the evidence's chorus. Sarah listened intently, searching for genuine remorse amid the legal posturing, her heart aching for all futures altered. The jury absorbed it all, their faces a mosaic of contemplation as closing arguments loomed. Media analyses dissected each day's proceedings, sparking public discourse on justice's nuances. The trial, a microcosm of broader societal questions, drew to its emotional peak, each testimony a step toward resolution. And in the trial's waning moments, as deliberations began, the courtroom buzzed with quiet tension, jurors sequestered to weigh the scales of evidence and intent. Sarah waited with supporters, her thoughts drifting to what Emily and Madison might say. Words of understanding, perhaps, tempered by the call for fairness. The community held its breath, united in anticipation. And in the empty witness stand, a faint echo lingered, the imagined laughter of two sisters, and their presence a visual whisper in the hushed room, guiding the path to whatever verdict awaited. The deliberations stretched into hours, then days, the jury room a cocoon of intense discussion where 12 strangers grappled with the tapestry of evidence and emotion laid before them. Notes scribbled on pads detailed the timelines, the messages that hinted at brewing resentment, the security footage that captured a shadow slipping away into the night. Jurors revisited Sarah's testimony, in her voice echoing in their minds as she described Emily's gentle guidance and Madison's sparkling enthusiasm, lives full of promise now silenced by a choice born of unchecked frustration. Debates flared over intent versus impulse, the defense's pleas for understanding clashing with the prosecution's unyielding chain of facts. Outside, the courthouse steps became a gathering place for supporters, candles flickering in the evening chill as Sarah stood among them, her face a mask of quiet strength, drawing comfort from shared stories of her daughter's impact. Media vans lined the street, reporters speculating on outcomes while respecting the gravity of the weight. Darius, in his holding area, paced subtly, the reality of potential consequences settling like a heavy fog, his earlier detachment giving way to fleeting glimpses of reflection. The community, watching from afar, held collective breath, their conversations turning to themes of forgiveness and fairness, a pondering if true accountability could ever fully mend the fractures left behind. As the third day dawned, whispers of progress filtered through the courthouse halls, jurors requesting reviews of key exhibits, the journal pages with their crossed-out vents of envy, the charm that linked a hurried exit to irrefutable presence. Emotions ran high in the room, some jurors wiping tears as they weighed the human elements. A young man's isolation against the irreversible loss of two bright futures. Sarah spent the time visiting the memorial park dedicated to her daughters, where benches bore plaques with their names, surrounded by blooming flowers planted by school friends. She traced the engravings, memories flooding back of family picnics and late-night talks, fueling her resolve to honor them through whatever verdict came. Prosecutors conferred in hushed tones, confident in their presentation, while the defense prepared statements for appeals, emphasizing rehabilitation over retribution. The neighborhood, forever marked, initiated youth outreach programs, channeling the tragedy into lessons on empathy and communication. Darius's mother attended daily, her presence a quiet plea for mercy, torn between love for her son and sorrow for the Carters. It was a delicate balance, the scales of justice tipping slowly under the weight of shared humanity. The announcement came on the fourth afternoon. A bailiff's call summoning all back to the courtroom, the air electric with anticipation as seats filled quickly. The judge entered with solemn poise, the room rising in unison before settling into tense silence. The foreperson stood, voice steady but laced with gravity, delivering the words that hung in the balance. Guilty on all counts. A collective exhale rippled through the space, sobs from Sarah's supporters, a stoic nod from prosecutors, and Darius's head bowing slightly, the first visible crack in his composed exterior. Sarah clutched a locket around her neck, tears streaming as relief mingled with enduring grief, the verdict a validation of her daughter's worth, though no words could restore what was taken. Media flashed bulletins outside, the news spreading like wildfire, prompting reflections on the system's role in addressing youthful missteps. The community reacted with subdued gatherings, toasts to Emily and Madison's memories. while experts analyze the outcome as a step toward broader societal healing. Darius's legal team signaled immediate appeals, but the moment stood as a milestone, bridging pain with the promise of closure. Sentencing hearings followed weeks later, the courtroom reconvening under the same hum of fluorescent lights, now charged with the finality of consequence. Victim impact statements poured forth, friends recounting Emily's acts of kindness, like tutoring struggling students, and Madison's infectious energy that lit up team huddles. Sarah spoke last, her voice unwavering as she addressed Darius directly, describing the void left in her world, yet extending a thread of hope for his future growth. The judge listened intently, reviewing reports on Darius's background, the psychological insights into his isolation, balanced against the deliberate nature of the acts. Prosecutors argued for a sentence reflecting the gravity, life terms that honored the lives lost, while the defense pleaded for leniency, citing youth and potential for change. Darius, rising to speak, offered words of regret, his tone subdued, eyes meeting Sarah's briefly in a moment of raw connection. The room held its breath, the weight of decisions echoing the tragedy's depth, as the community outside held parallel discussions on redemption's possibilities. The judge's words came deliberately. Each sentence measured like steps toward resolution, acknowledging the pain inflicted, the betrayal of trust, and the need for accountability that deters and heals. He sentenced Darius to life without parole for each count, to run consecutively, a ruling that silenced the room with its finality. Gasps mingled with nods of approval, Sarah closing her eyes in quiet acceptance. The gavels fall, a punctuation to months of turmoil. Darius's shoulders slumped, the reality settling in as marshals led him away, his mother's soft cries the only sound breaking the hush. Media captured the scene, their reports emphasizing justice served while sparking debates on sentencing reforms. The neighborhood, in response, planted a garden in the sisters' names, a living tribute blooming with each season. Sarah felt a measure of peace, vowing to carry Emily and Madison's light forward through advocacy and remembrance. In the aftermath, as appeals loomed and life moved onward, the case became a touchstone for conversations on prevention, turning shadows into lessons learned. Sarah visited the courtroom one last time, empty now, reflecting on the journey from loss to this hard-won reckoning. And in the deserted jury box, faint sunlight filtered through windows, casting patterns that danced like forgotten laughter, a visual echo of two sisters' enduring joy, lingering long after the doors had closed. The echoes of that gavel's fall reverberated far beyond the courtroom walls, marking not just the end of a trial, but the beginning of a new chapter in the lives forever altered by Darius Hill's actions. In the state where the case unfolded, the law allowed for the ultimate penalty in cases of such deliberate betrayal, and the judge, after careful deliberation, had delivered a sentence that silenced the room: death. It was a ruling reserved for the most egregious acts, or one that acknowledged the premeditated nature of the tragedy, the messages of intent, the journal's dark confessions, the trust exploited in a home meant for safety. Sarah Carter, stepping out into the sunlight, felt the weight lift slightly, though the void remained. Justice, in its stark form, offered a measure of solace, a validation that her daughters' lives held profound value. Media outlets broadcast the news nationwide, sparking debates on the death penalty's role in modern society, with experts weighing the balance between retribution and rehabilitation for someone so young. Darius, led away in restraints, his face ashen for the first time, faced the reality of appeals ahead, his legal team vowing to fight on grounds of age and circumstance. The community, gathered in quiet clusters, processed the outcome with mixed emotions, relief for accountability, sorrow for all futures dimmed, turning their energy toward memorials that celebrated Emily and Madison's enduring spirits. What appeals processes ignited almost immediately, lawyers filing motions that dissected every trial nuance, from jury selection to evidence admissibility, arguing that Darius's youth warranted mercy over finality. Courts reviewed the case meticulously, transcripts pored over in chambers where judges pondered the psychological reports highlighting adolescent impulsivity. Yet the core facts stood unyielding. The invitation that led to betrayal, the lives stolen in moments of unchecked emotion. And Sarah participated in hearings remotely, her statements a poignant thread weaving through legal jargon, reminding all of the human cost: Emily's unfinished nursing path, Madison's unwritten poems. Supporters rallied online, petitions circulating for commutation, while others countered with reminders of the sisters' innocence, fueling a national conversation on sentencing reforms. Darius, in his cell, engaged in mandated programs, his reflections shared in letters that hinted at remorse, though skeptics questioned their sincerity. The neighborhood on Ridgewood Lane evolved, new families moving in, but the Carter home stood as a quiet shrine, its mailbox adorned with fading ribbons, a symbol of resilience amid change. Sarah found purpose in advocacy groups, speaking at conferences about prevention, her voice carrying the sisters' light into rooms full of policymakers eager for solutions. Years ticked by in the slow grind of appeals, each denial a step closer to resolution. The higher courts affirming the original ruling with measured opinions that balanced compassion with consequence. Darius's team exhausted avenues, from state supreme reviews to federal petitions, citing evolving standards on brain development that suggested extending protections beyond 18, yet precedents held firm in this jurisdiction. Sarah aged gracefully through it all, her hair streaked with silver, but her determination unbowed. She authored a book on her daughter's legacies, our proceeds funding scholarships for young women pursuing dreams like Emily's and Madison's. Community events honored them annually, soccer tournaments in Madison's name, health fairs echoing Emily's calling, drawing crowds who shared stories of inspiration. Darius, facing the inevitability, turned inward, participating in restorative justice sessions, where he confronted the pain inflicted, his words reaching Sarah through mediators, offering glimpses of growth amid the shadows. And media followed sporadically, documentaries exploring the case's layers, prompting viewers to question, when does youth excuse the inexcusable? The answers varied, but for those touched directly, the pursuit of peace became a daily choice. The final appeal's rejection came on a rainy afternoon, the court's decision sealing Darius's fate, a culmination of legal battles that underscored the system's deliberate pace. Sarah received the news via a quiet call, standing in her garden where flowers bloomed in vibrant defiance, tears mixing with the downpour as closure settled like mist. Vigils reignited across the suburb, candles glowing against the wet pavement, voices uniting in songs of remembrance. Darius, informed in his facility, requested a meeting with spiritual advisors, his path now one of preparation and reflection. Letters to his mother expressing regrets, long held silent. The community reflected on the journey. The parents teaching children about empathy's power, schools incorporating lessons from the tragedy to foster open dialogues. Sarah visited the gravesite often, placing tokens, a stethoscope charm for Emily, a notebook for Madison, whispering updates on how their influence rippled outward, touching lives they never knew. It was a testament to enduring bonds, where loss birthed unexpected strength, guiding a neighborhood toward healing. In the broader scope, the case influenced policy whispers, advocates pushing for age expansions in sentencing guidelines, citing brain science that blurred lines between teen and adult. Sarah joined these efforts, testifying before committees, her story a compelling force for change without diminishing the need for accountability. Darius's execution date loomed, a somber marker that divided opinions, some seeing it as fitting justice, others as a relic of harsher times. Media retrospectives highlighted the evolution, from the shocking courtroom smile to this quiet reckoning, prompting soul-searching on society's role in preventing such paths. Friends of the sisters, now adults with families, gathered yearly, sharing laughs over old photos, keeping Emily and Madison's joy alive. Sarah, in quiet moments, felt their presence, a gentle reassurance amid the storm's aftermath. The day of reckoning arrived under clear skies, the facility's walls a stark backdrop to final goodbyes. Darius's last words, a murmured apology carried on the wind. Sarah chose not to attend, instead walking Ridgewood Lane, where new laughter echoed from yards once silent, a cycle of renewal. The news confirmed the end, closing a chapter that had spanned years, leaving space for reflection on mercy's limits. Communities nationwide paused, debating the outcome's lessons, while Sarah planted seeds in her garden, watching them grow as symbols of hope reborn. And in the empty courtroom where it all began, dust motes danced in slanting light, a visual echo of two sisters' unbreakable spirit, shimmering eternally as the world moved on. With the final chapter closed on Darius Hill's story, the world did indeed move on, but not without carrying the indelible marks of a tragedy that reshaped countless lives. Sarah Carter, now in her later years, became a beacon of quiet advocacy. She traveling to schools and community centers to share the lessons woven from her daughter's memories. She spoke of Emily's unwavering kindness, how she'd bandage a neighbor's scraped knee with the same care she'd one day apply in a hospital ward, and Madison's boundless curiosity, her notebooks filled with sketches and verses that captured the wonder of everyday moments. These talks weren't about dwelling in sorrow, but igniting change, urging young people to voice their struggles, to seek help before frustrations built into unbreakable walls. Communities listened, inspired to implement programs on emotional awareness, turning Ridgewood Lane's shadowed past into a foundation for brighter futures. Darius's mother, in her own way, contributed anonymously to these efforts. Her letters to Sarah a tentative bridge of shared grief, acknowledging the pain her son had caused while seeking a path to personal forgiveness. The neighborhood, once fractured, bloomed anew with gardens and murals honoring the sisters, vibrant colors splashing across fences where silence had once reigned, a testament to resilience's slow, steady bloom. Yet beneath the surface of progress, questions lingered like faint echoes in an empty hall, prompting deeper reflections on the human capacity for both darkness and light. Psychologists who studied the case years later pointed to Darius's isolation as a cautionary tale, and how unaddressed feelings of rejection could fester in a young mind still forming its understanding of the world. They noted patterns in his journal, entries that started as simple vents but escalated into plans, mirroring broader societal issues where youth grapple with identity amid pressures unseen. Sarah, collaborating with experts, helped develop resources for parents, guides that encouraged open conversations about envy and belonging, drawing from Emily's protective nature as a model for guidance. Friends of the sisters, scattered now across cities, reunited annually, sharing how Madison's laughter still inspired their own families, or how Emily's steadiness guided their careers in helping professions. Media retrospectives revisited the trial, not for sensationalism, but to explore evolving views on justice, with panels debating if earlier interventions could have altered the path. Darius's story, preserved in case studies, served as a quiet reminder that accountability, while necessary, often arrives too late to mend what was broken, urging a shift toward prevention over reaction. The legal ripples extended far beyond one courtroom, influencing policies in states where similar cases arose, with advocates citing Darius's age as a pivot point for reforms. Sarah testified before legislative committees, her voice steady, as she described the chain of small oversights, the unnoticed glances, and the dismissed tensions that led to irreversible loss. She advocated for expanded mental health support in schools, envisioning a world where young people like Darius could find outlets before resentment took root. Responses varied. Some lawmakers pushed for stricter guidelines, others for compassionate alternatives. But her words planted seeds of change, resulting in pilot programs that paired at-risk youth with mentors. The Carter family's old home, now a community center, she hosted workshops where teens shared stories, fostering the trust Emily and Madison had embodied. Darius's appeals, though exhausted, sparked academic papers on sentencing equity, questioning if 18 marked a true threshold of maturity. Sarah found solace in these developments, seeing her daughter's influence in every policy tweak, every young life steered toward better choices, a legacy that transcended the pain of their absence. All personal healing came in waves for those closest to the heart of the storm, moments of quiet revelation amid the rush of daily life. Sarah often walked the paths where her daughters once played, the maple trees now taller, their leaves whispering secrets of seasons past. She'd pause at the spot where the security camera had captured that fateful shadow, not in anger, but in contemplation of how fragile connections could be. Letters from strangers arrived steadily, parents thanking her for the courage to discuss tough topics with their children, or former classmates of Madison sharing how her poetry inspired their own creative pursuits. Even Darius's mother reached out more openly over time, their correspondence evolving into a fragile understanding, two women bound by loss, yet choosing empathy over bitterness. The community honored this spirit with annual festivals, when blending music and art to celebrate the sisters' joys, where laughter rang out like echoes of Madison's own. These gatherings reminded everyone that while justice had been served, true restoration lay in the ongoing work of building kinder worlds, one conversation at a time. Broader societal shifts emerged as the case faded from headlines, embedding itself in cultural memory through books, podcasts, and educational modules. Sarah co-authored a volume with psychologists on detailing the psychological undercurrents of fixation and rejection, using anonymized excerpts from Darius's journal to illustrate warning signs without glorifying the acts. It became required reading in some counseling programs, equipping professionals to spot and address simmering tensions early. Emily's dream of nursing lived on through scholarships awarded to aspiring caregivers, recipients often writing to Sarah about how the funding changed their trajectories. She, much like Emily, had hoped to change lives. Madison's artistic side inspired local contests, young poets submitting works that captured themes of friendship and resilience, their words a living tribute. Darius's fate, meanwhile, prompted quiet prison reform discussions, emphasizing rehabilitation for those sentenced young, though his path ended without further recourse. Sarah reflected on this in her journal, noting how the tragedy's threads had woven into a tapestry of positive change, in honoring her daughters in ways she could never have imagined. As years turned to decades, the story of the Carter sisters became folklore in Ridgewood Lane, a gentle cautionary tale passed down with care, emphasizing love's power over division. Sarah, in her twilight, surrounded by grandchildren from extended family, shared photos and stories, her eyes lighting up at memories of Emily's wisdom and Madison's spark. The neighborhood, vibrant once more, unfeatured a plaque at the community center. In memory of Emily and Madison Carter, whose light guides us still. Visitors paused there, reflecting on how one event rippled outward, sparking movements for empathy and awareness. Darius's name faded, a footnote in legal texts, but the lessons endured, shaping policies and hearts alike. Sarah's final advocacy push saw national recognition, awards honoring her tireless work, a fitting capstone to a life redefined by loss, yet enriched by purpose. In the end, as Sarah sat on her porch watching sunsets paint the sky in hues her daughters loved, she felt a profound peace, knowing their essence permeated every changed life, every prevented shadow. And in the golden light of dusk, leaves rustled softly, a visual echo of two sisters' whispers carrying on the wind as eternal guardians of hope and healing. As the whispers of healing carried on the wind, they seemed to weave through the fabric of time itself, touching not just Ridgewood Lane, but echoing across generations who learned of the Carter sisters' story through whispered tales and digital archives. Sarah Carter, in her enduring role as guardian of their memory, expanded her advocacy into virtual realms, hosting online forums where families shared experiences of loss and recovery. Her gentle guidance, a digital extension of Emily's nurturing touch. Participants from distant states joined, drawn by podcasts that retold the case with sensitivity, focusing on the sisters' vibrant personalities. Madison's flair for turning ordinary days into adventures, like impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, and Emily's quiet acts of service, such as organizing food drives for local shelters. These sessions fostered connections, with parents learning to spot signs of isolation in their children, much like those that had quietly built in Darius before the storm broke. Sarah's message was clear. Prevention begins with conversation, a lesson etched from the pain of overlooked shadows. Even Darius's mother, finding her voice in anonymous contributions, shared insights on recognizing emotional drifts, her words a subtle olive branch in the ongoing dialogue of reconciliation. The community center, once the Carter home, buzzed with these virtual echoes, screens glowing with faces united in purpose, transforming a site of tragedy into a hub of proactive hope. Deeper explorations into the psychological aftermath revealed layers of complexity that continued to unfold as researchers revisited Darius's profile in studies on youthful decision-making. They highlighted how his journal entries, once damning evidence, now served as anonymized examples in textbooks, illustrating the slow boil of resentment when rejection meets unaddressed vulnerability. Experts noted parallels in other cases, emphasizing that 18, while legally adult, often carried the lingering impulsivity of adolescence, sparking calls for nuanced sentencing that blended accountability with rehabilitation. Sarah collaborated on these papers, her input grounding abstract theories in real human impact, the way Madison's soccer games had brought neighbors together, now memorialized in youth leagues that promoted teamwork over rivalry. Friends of the sisters, many now mentors themselves, volunteered in these programs, are sharing stories of how Emily's patience helped them through tough times, inspiring a new wave of community leaders. Media specials revisited the trial's pivotal moments, not to sensationalize, but to educate, with reenactments focusing on the emotional arcs, from the initial shock of discovery to the courtroom's tense revelations, prompting viewers to reflect on their own circles, questioning if hidden struggles lurked unspoken. Darius's fate, a somber endpoint, fueled these discussions, reminding all that justice, while final, often left room for societal growth in its wake. Policy changes gained traction as the case's legacy influenced legislative halls, with Sarah's testimonies becoming rallying points for bills aimed at enhancing mental health resources in schools. She described vivid memories, Emily poring over nursing textbooks late into the night, Madison scribbling poems by flashlight, to illustrate the futures stolen, to urging lawmakers to invest in early support systems that could intercept paths like Darius's. Successes emerged. Funding for counselors increased in several districts, programs modeled after the sisters' community spirit, where teens learned conflict resolution through creative outlets like art and sports. Sarah watched these developments with a mix of pride and wistfulness, seeing echoes of her daughters in every young participant who found their voice. The neighborhood adapted too, with annual awareness walks along Ridgewood Lane, participants carrying lanterns symbolizing light over darkness, sharing anecdotes that kept Emily and Madison's essences alive. Darius's mother attended one such event incognito, her quiet presence a step toward communal healing, acknowledging the shared humanity in grief's vast landscape. These initiatives spread, adopted by other suburbs touched by similar stories, and creating a network of resilience that honored the past while safeguarding the future. Personal milestones marked the passage of time as Sarah celebrated what would have been Emily's graduation with a ceremony at the community center, awarding scholarships to aspiring nurses who embodied her daughter's compassion. Recipients shared letters describing how the support propelled them forward, much like Emily's encouragement had lifted her peers. For Madison, poetry slams drew crowds of young writers, their verses weaving themes of joy and connection, prizes including journals inscribed with her favorite quotes. Sarah's grandchildren, growing up in this nurtured environment, asked questions about their aunts, prompting family stories that blended laughter with lessons on empathy. Even distant relatives contributed, establishing funds for animal shelters in memory of the sisters' weekend volunteer shifts, where Madison's energy had coaxed shy pets into play. Darius's story, meanwhile, appeared in ethical debates within legal circles, his appeals denials cited as precedents for balancing severity with evolving understandings of maturity. Sarah found unexpected peace in these evolutions, her home filled with mementos, a framed poem from Madison, a stethoscope from Emily, reminders that their influence transcended the tragedy, blooming in acts of kindness across miles. Our cultural impacts rippled outward, inspiring artistic expressions that captured the narrative's emotional depth. Documentaries and books delved into the case's nuances, portraying Darius not as a villain, but as a cautionary figure of unmet needs, while centering the sisters' light. Emily's dream-driven focus, Madison's free-spirited warmth. Sarah consulted on one such project, ensuring authenticity, her input shaping scenes that highlighted preventive measures over dramatic recreations. These works sparked school curriculums where students discussed themes of trust and consequence, fostering generations more attuned to emotional undercurrents. The community center hosted screenings, followed by panels where experts and locals shared insights, turning reflection into action. Darius's mother, in a rare public moment, penned an essay on forgiveness's challenges, her words resonating with those navigating similar paths, adding layers to the collective healing. As decades unfolded, the story settled into legend, a touchstone for resilience that Sarah passed to younger advocates, her role evolving into that of elder guide. She watched sunrises from her porch, feeling the sisters' presence in every gentle breeze, their legacy a living force in a world forever changed. In the quiet expanse of time, as new stories emerged and old ones faded, the essence of Emily and Madison endured, their light a beacon for those still seeking paths out of shadow. And in the rustling pages of a forgotten journal, words blurred by years, a visual echo of choices reconsidered, whispering softly of redemption's quiet possibility in the hearts that remained. That quiet possibility of redemption lingered in the air like a half-forgotten melody, inspiring those who carried the story forward to seek out paths of understanding and growth. Sarah Carter, ever the steward of her daughter's legacy, partnered with educational initiatives that reached into classrooms across the country, where teachers used anonymized accounts of the Ridgewood Lane events to spark discussions on empathy and emotional intelligence. Students role-played scenarios of conflict, learning to voice frustrations before they built into barriers, drawing from Emily's model of patient listening, how she'd sit with friends for hours, offering advice without judgment. Madison's creative spark inspired art therapy sessions, where young people expressed inner turmoils through drawings and words, turning potential shadows into canvases of hope. Sarah visited these classes virtually, her smile warm as she shared light-hearted tales of the sisters' antics, like the time Madison convinced Emily to dye their hair matching shades of blue for a school event. Laughter echoing through the house. These programs reported successes, fewer incidents of isolation, more teens seeking guidance. A ripple effect that honored the lives once dimmed by unchecked resentment. Darius's mother, finding her own footing, contributed resources to similar efforts, her anonymous donations a subtle nod to the shared humanity that bound all involved, fostering a cycle of healing that transcended individual pain. Explorations into the societal undercurrents continued to evolve, with sociologists examining how suburban facades could mask deeper disconnects, using the case as a lens for broader studies. They pointed to Darius's background, a young man navigating solitude amid a bustling neighborhood, as emblematic of modern challenges, where digital worlds amplified feelings of exclusion. Reports emphasized proactive measures, like community hubs that encouraged intergenerational bonds, mirroring the welcoming spirit Emily and Madison had embodied in their volunteer work at local shelters. Sarah lent her voice to these analyses, co-hosting webinars where experts dissected the trial's emotional peaks, from the tense witness testimonies to the judge's measured words, highlighting how such moments could educate on justice's human face. Friends of the sisters, now scattered but connected through online groups, shared updates. One starting a nonprofit for youth mentoring, another publishing a collection of poems inspired by Madison's style. Media evolved too, with thoughtful series exploring redemption arcs, featuring stories of individuals who turned early struggles into positive paths, subtly contrasting with Darius's irreversible choices. These narratives prompted viewers to reflect on their own lives, questioning how small acts of kindness like Emily's everyday encouragements could prevent larger fractures in the social fabric. Policy advancements built on this foundation as advocates, bolstered by Sarah's persistent efforts, lobbied for nationwide expansions in mental health access, citing the case's timeline as evidence of missed opportunities. Legislators debated bills that integrated emotional wellness into school curriculums, with Sarah testifying remotely, her anecdotes painting vivid pictures, the way Madison's soccer enthusiasm united teams, or Emily's study sessions that boosted classmates' confidence. Victories came in increments: new funding for counselors in underserved areas, apps designed for anonymous teen support, all bearing traces of the sisters' influence. The Ridgewood Lane Community Center became a model, hosting international visitors who studied its transformation from a site of sorrow to a beacon of prevention. Darius's story, preserved in ethical case studies, informed these reforms, his appeal's outcomes serving as touchstones for discussions on balancing accountability with compassion for youthful missteps. Sarah watched these changes unfold with a sense of fulfillment, her garden blooming with flowers in the sisters' favorite colors. At each petal, a reminder that from deep roots of loss, new growth could emerge, resilient and reaching toward the sun. Personal reflections deepened as time wove its gentle tapestry, with Sarah curating a digital archive of memories, scanned photos of family outings, audio clips of Madison's laughter captured on old recordings, Emily's handwritten notes on helping others. Grandchildren pored over these, asking questions that bridged generations, and learning how their great-aunt's spirits shaped family values of openness and care. Even distant echoes reached back. A former neighbor, moved away years prior, returned for a memorial event, sharing how the tragedy prompted her to foster stronger ties in her new community. Darius's mother, in her later correspondence with Sarah, expressed gratitude for the indirect ways their shared path had led to personal growth. Her words a testament to forgiveness's slow bloom. Our annual festivals on Ridgewood Lane grew, blending music, art, and discussions, where attendees lit lanterns symbolizing light over shadow, their glow illuminating faces, young and old, in collective remembrance. These gatherings reinforced that while the past could not be rewritten, its lessons could illuminate futures, turning individual stories into communal wisdom. Cultural resonances amplified through creative mediums, with artists drawing inspiration from the narrative's themes of trust and renewal. Plays and short films depicted fictionalized versions, centering the sisters' bond as a force of enduring positivity, with Sarah consulting to ensure respectful portrayals. One such production, a theater piece performed in local schools, used symbolic elements, like a shared keychain representing connection, to explore themes of invitation and boundary, prompting audiences to consider their own interactions. When Emily's aspiration for healing inspired medical students who named study groups after her, while Madison's poetic flair lived on in writing workshops that encouraged expressive outlets for emotions. Darius's endpoint, a somber note in these tales, served as a pivot for exploring redemption's limits, encouraging creators to focus on prevention's power. Sarah attended premieres when able, her presence a quiet endorsement, feeling the sisters' essence in every applause, every inspired conversation that followed. As the years accumulated like layers of a well-tended archive, Sarah's role shifted to that of storyteller emeritus, passing the torch to younger advocates who carried the message forward with fresh energy. She rested more, her porch a vantage point for observing the neighborhood's vibrant life. Children playing where silence once fell, families waving in easy familiarity. The legacy of Emily and Madison pulsed in every small act of kindness, at every prevented shadow, a living testament to love's triumph over loss. In the tapestry of time, as new chapters unfolded for all touched by the story, the sisters' light remained a constant guiding star in a sky forever changed. And in the fading light of an open journal, pages turned by a gentle breeze, a visual echo of words unspoken, blending into the horizon as hope's quiet promise endured. That hope's quiet promise wove itself into the very rhythm of daily life, are becoming a subtle undercurrent in the stories told and retold by those who had been forever marked by the events on Ridgewood Lane. Sarah Carter, with the wisdom of years etched into her gentle features, embraced her role as a living archive, collecting oral histories from neighbors and friends who remembered the sisters' everyday magic. Emily's habit of leaving encouraging notes in lunchboxes for schoolmates, and/or Madison's impromptu talent shows that turned backyard gatherings into bursts of shared joy. These anecdotes formed the heart of a digital museum she curated, accessible to anyone seeking inspiration amid their own shadows, with interactive maps tracing the sisters' favorite spots around the neighborhood, each pin a portal to memories of laughter and light. Young visitors, often teens navigating their own uncertainties, left messages of gratitude, sharing how the stories helped them open up to trusted adults, preventing the kind of isolation that had once taken root in Darius. Sarah's eyes would sparkle during these updates, seeing echoes of her daughters in every transformed life, a chain of positivity that stretched far beyond the suburb's maple-lined streets. Even Darius's mother, in her private reflections, found solace in knowing that the tragedy's lessons had sparked such widespread empathy. Are her occasional notes to Sarah carrying words of mutual respect, bridging divides once thought insurmountable? Societal examinations deepened as academics and activists alike dissected the case's long shadow, using it as a framework for understanding how communities could foster resilience in the face of hidden struggles. Conferences featured panels where experts analyzed the psychological buildup, Darius's subtle shifts from distant observer to active participant in his own unraveling, contrasting it with proactive strategies like peer support networks that encouraged early sharing of burdens. Sarah contributed virtually, her voice steady as she recounted the sisters' unbreakable bond, how Emily's protective instincts and Madison's open heart had created a home full of warmth, a model for families everywhere. These discussions led to collaborative projects, such as nationwide campaigns promoting connection days in schools, where students engaged in activities inspired by Madison's creative energy, art circles and storytelling sessions that built bridges over potential divides. Friends of the sisters, many now grandparents themselves, volunteered as facilitators, passing on tales of how Emily's quiet strength helped them through personal challenges. are inspiring a new generation to value emotional openness. Media outlets amplified these efforts, producing segments that highlighted success stories, teens who, thanks to such programs, navigated rejections with grace rather than resentment, turning potential conflicts into opportunities for growth. Darius's narrative, handled with care in these contexts, served as a sobering reminder that unchecked emotions could alter lives, but collective awareness could redirect those paths toward healing. Now, policy landscapes continued to shift under the weight of this legacy, with Sarah's advocacy evolving into advisory roles on national boards dedicated to youth well-being. She lobbied for integrated support systems, drawing vivid parallels to the overlooked signs in her own neighborhood, the lingering glances, the unspoken tensions that had escalated into heartbreak. Lawmakers, moved by her testimonies, passed measures expanding access to counseling in community centers, modeled after the one on Ridgewood Lane, where workshops blended Emily's nurturing approach with Madison's playful creativity. Success metrics poured in: reduced reports of youth isolation, increased participation in mentorship programs, all bearing the subtle imprint of the sisters' spirits. The annual walks along the lane grew into regional events, participants from afar joining to light paths with lanterns, symbolizing the triumph of light over fleeting shadows. Darius's mother attended one anonymously, her steps a personal pilgrimage toward acceptance, finding unexpected community in the shared pursuit of better tomorrows. These advancements created a network of safe spaces where young voices were heard and supported, ensuring that the lessons from one quiet street resonated in halls of power and hearts alike. Personal journeys of renewal unfolded in tender, unexpected ways. As Sarah gathered her extended family for holidays infused with the sisters' favorite traditions, baking sessions echoing Emily's careful recipes, storytelling circles alive with Madison's imaginative flair. Grandchildren, curious and kind, carried forward these rituals, asking about their great-aunts with wide-eyed wonder, learning values of compassion that shaped their own budding worlds. Distant echoes arrived in letters from strangers, a teacher crediting the digital archive for helping a student through tough times, or a former classmate of Darius sharing how the case prompted him to seek guidance early in life. Sarah's home, filled with these tokens of connection, a shelf of donated artworks inspired by Madison, a collection of thank you cards mirroring Emily's helpful nature, became a sanctuary of remembrance. Even in moments of solitude, she felt their presence, a gentle reassurance that love's reach extended beyond any single loss, weaving through time to touch souls yet unborn. Cultural expressions blossomed further, with musicians and writers channeling the narrative into works that celebrated endurance and empathy. Songs composed in the sisters' honor played at festivals, lyrics weaving themes of sisterly bonds and communal healing, while novels drew loose inspiration from the events, focusing on characters who chose dialogue over division. Our Sarah endorsed select projects, ensuring they emphasized prevention and positivity, her input shaping endings that highlighted hope's quiet victory. These creations reached global audiences, sparking international dialogues on emotional health, with adaptations in various languages carrying the message far and wide. The Ridgewood Community Center hosted exhibitions of these works, drawing visitors who left inspired, carrying the sisters' light into their own corners of the world. As the tapestry of years continued to unfold, Sarah's influence remained a steady force, her wisdom passed to emerging leaders who amplified the call for compassionate change. She watched from her garden, blooms flourishing in perpetual tribute, knowing that Emily and Madison's essence lived on in every act of kindness, every shadow averted. In the grand weave of existence, as stories intertwined and evolved, the sisters' glow persisted, a timeless reminder of love's unyielding power. And in the soft turn of an archive's digital page, images flickered to life, a visual echo of two smiling faces, illuminating the screen as eternal beacons of grace and possibility. The beacons of grace and possibility that Emily and Madison represented continued to illuminate paths long after the immediate echoes of the trial had faded, their legacy becoming a cornerstone for ongoing community renewal in Ridgewood Lane and beyond. Sarah Carter, channeling her unyielding spirit, transformed her advocacy into a series of local initiatives that focused on bridging generational gaps, inspired by the way Emily had always mentored her younger sister with patient wisdom. Workshops at the community center invited elders to share life stories with teens, fostering dialogues that dismantled walls of misunderstanding, much like Madison's infectious laughter had once drawn people together in unexpected joy. Participants left these sessions empowered, armed with tools to address budding resentments before they took root, drawing from the case's lessons on how small oversights, like Darius's unnoticed isolation, could escalate if left unchecked. Sarah oversaw these programs with a quiet pride, often sharing anecdotes of the sisters' everyday adventures, such as their weekend hikes where Madison's curiosity turned simple trails into explorations of wonder, reminding all that connection was the antidote to division. Neighbors, once shadowed by the tragedy, now volunteered eagerly, their involvement a collective step toward healing, turning the suburb into a model of proactive empathy where trust was rebuilt one conversation at a time. Even distant family members contributed, sending resources that expanded the reach, ensuring the sisters' light touched lives far from the maple-lined streets that had once been their home. Psychological insights into the events evolved as experts revisited the narrative, using it to develop frameworks for understanding youthful emotional turbulence. Studies emphasized Darius's progression from subtle envy to decisive action as a cautionary pattern, highlighting the need for early intervention strategies that addressed rejection's sting without letting it fester. Sarah collaborated on these efforts, providing personal context, the way Emily's protective nature had shielded Madison from minor slights, a bond that could serve as a blueprint for family dynamics. These analyses led to school-based programs where students learned to identify and articulate feelings, incorporating creative outlets like journaling, echoing Madison's poetic expressions. Friends of the sisters, scattered but connected, shared testimonies in these sessions, recounting how Emily's steady guidance had helped them navigate teen challenges, inspiring curricula that promoted resilience. Media features on these developments portrayed the story as one of transformation, and with Sarah's interviews underscoring forgiveness's role in personal growth, her words resonating with audiences grappling with their own hidden struggles. Darius's path, treated with sensitivity, became a pivotal example in training materials for counselors, reminding them that while some choices led to irreversible ends, timely support could alter trajectories, fostering hope in even the darkest narratives. Policy shifts gained traction as advocates, bolstered by Sarah's tireless work, are pushed for enhanced community resources, drawing direct lines from the tragedy's timeline to preventive measures. She testified in local hearings, evoking vivid memories of the sisters' vibrant routines, Emily's evening study sessions interrupted by Madison's playful distractions, to illustrate the futures lost to unaddressed tensions. Reforms followed, increased funding for neighborhood safe spaces, where teens could seek guidance anonymously, modeled after the welcoming home the Carters had once maintained. Annual community forums, born from these changes, gathered residents to discuss emotional health, with lanterns symbolizing the light Emily and Madison had brought, now guiding discussions on trust and vigilance. Darius's mother, finding subtle ways to engage, supported these anonymously, her quiet contributions a step toward communal reconciliation. These advancements created a supportive network, reducing instances of youth disconnection and ensuring that the quiet buildups of resentment were met with compassionate responses, honoring the sisters' memory through actionable change. Personal milestones of healing dotted the years as Sarah curated family traditions that kept the sisters close, spring picnics featuring Emily's favorite recipes, autumn evenings of storytelling inspired by Madison's creativity. Grandchildren embraced these rituals, learning values of kindness that shaped their worlds, often asking about their great-aunts with curiosity that bridged the past and present. Echoes from the community arrived in heartfelt ways, a neighbor planting a garden in tribute or a former classmate dedicating a charity run to their joy. Sarah's reflections in these moments affirmed that love's endurance outlasted any shadow, her home a sanctuary of mementos that whispered of unbreakable bonds. Cultural tributes flourished, with local artists creating works that celebrated the sisters' essence, from murals depicting their laughter to songs weaving themes of unity. Sarah endorsed these, ensuring they focused on hope, turning the narrative into a source of inspiration for all. As time flowed onward, Sarah's influence remained a gentle force, her story a reminder of resilience's power in the face of loss. In the weave of memory, the sisters' light persisted, guiding hearts toward grace. And in a blooming garden under the sun, petals unfurled, a visual echo of lives well lived, blooming eternally in the warmth of remembrance. The warmth of remembrance enveloped Ridgewood Lane like a gentle embrace, where the sisters' legacy continued to flourish in ways both profound and intimate, shaping the suburb into a living testament to their enduring spirits. Sarah Carter, with the resilience forged from years of advocacy, expanded her foundation's reach by establishing satellite programs in neighboring towns, each one a nod to Emily's compassionate heart, clinics offering free emotional support sessions where trained facilitators guided young people through the mazes of rejection and self-doubt. These spaces buzzed with activity, teens sharing stories in circles reminiscent of Madison's impromptu gatherings, her playful energy recreated through games that turned vulnerability into strength. Sarah visited often, her presence a calming force as she recounted tales of the sisters' unbreakable bond, like the time Emily stayed up all night helping Madison craft a school project, their laughter cutting through the quiet hours. Participants left transformed, equipped with strategies to address brewing resentments, drawing direct inspiration from the case's cautionary arc. Darius's slow descent from silent observer to the heart of tragedy, a path now interrupted in countless lives through proactive care. Neighbors, once tentative in their involvement, now led these sessions, their commitment a collective healing, turning the once shadowed streets into avenues of open dialogue and mutual support. Even global partners adapted the model, translating materials into multiple languages, ensuring that the light Emily and Madison had kindled spread far, illuminating corners where isolation might otherwise take hold. Psychological explorations into the tragedy's depths advanced with innovative research, as scholars built on earlier studies to create comprehensive models for preventing emotional escalation in youth. They dissected patterns like Darius's journaled frustrations, viewing them as windows into the adolescent mind's vulnerabilities, and developed interventions that emphasized early empathy training, inspired by Emily's natural gift for understanding others' pains. Sarah contributed personal anecdotes to these efforts, describing how Madison's creative outlets, doodling verses during stressful times, had served as her sister's emotional anchor, a technique now integrated into therapeutic apps for teens. These tools gained widespread adoption, with schools reporting decreased incidents of bottled-up anger, fostering environments where young people could express themselves freely, much like the sisters had in their close-knit home. Friends of Emily and Madison, connected through the Foundation's alumni network, volunteered as peer counselors, sharing how Emily's quiet wisdom had guided them through their own youthful turmoils, inspiring modules that paired mentors with those showing signs of withdrawal. Media coverage of these advancements portrayed the story as a beacon of hope, with documentaries featuring Sarah's reflective interviews, where she spoke of justice's dual role, delivering accountability while paving ways for societal growth, her words resonating with families navigating similar shadows. On Darius's narrative, anonymized in these contexts, became a key teaching point, illustrating that while some choices led to final reckonings, collective vigilance could redirect many more toward paths of renewal and understanding. Policy landscapes transformed under the sustained push of advocates, with Sarah's foundation influencing key legislations that mandated emotional health curricula in public education systems. She lobbied passionately on evoking memories of the sisters' vibrant routines, Emily's volunteer shifts at the animal shelter where her kindness coaxed trust from wary creatures, paralleled to programs teaching kids to build bridges over divides. Reforms took shape. Nationwide grants for community wellness centers, equipped with resources that echoed Madison's artistic flair, using creative therapies to unpack hidden resentments. Annual policy summits, inspired by the neighborhood's healing journey, are brought together experts and survivors with symbolic lantern ceremonies honoring the light that had emerged from darkness. Darius's mother, emerging more publicly through supportive networks, shared her insights on parental challenges, adding nuance to discussions on family interventions. These changes fostered a safer societal fabric, reducing youth-related conflicts and ensuring that the subtle buildups of envy, like those that had ensnared Darius, were met with structured support rather than tragic outcomes. Sarah observed these victories with a deep sense of fulfillment, her advocacy a living tribute to her daughters, each policy win a bloom in the garden of their memory, nurturing growth where loss had once taken root. Personal narratives of healing wove through the years as Sarah preserved family customs that kept Emily and Madison's essences alive. Winter evenings by the fire, recounting Emily's tales of helping others, or spring outings inspired by Madison's love of nature's wonders. Grandchildren immersed themselves in these traditions, learning empathy's value through activities that mirrored the sisters' joys, their questions sparking conversations that bridged eras. Echoes from the community surfaced in touching gestures, a local artist dedicating a sculpture to their bond, or a former neighbor organizing charity events in their name. Sarah's reflections affirmed love's timeless power, her sanctuary home filled with artifacts that whispered of joy amid sorrow, a space where grief had evolved into graceful acceptance. Cultural reverberations grew, with storytellers crafting works that celebrated the sisters' light, from children's books teaching kindness to theatrical productions exploring renewal's themes. Sarah guided these with care, ensuring they highlighted hope, turning the narrative into an inspirational force for global audiences. As decades passed, Sarah's wisdom anchored ongoing efforts, her story an enduring symbol of transformation. In memory's embrace, the sisters' glow remained, a source of infinite grace. And in a lantern's soft flicker at dusk, shadows danced away, a visual echo of unbreakable light, guiding eternally through the night. The guiding light through the night became a metaphor for the unyielding hope that Emily and Madison Carter's memory instilled in all who carried their story forward, and transforming a single tragedy into a catalyst for widespread compassion and change. Sarah Carter, embodying the resilience her daughters had shown in their short lives, dedicated her later years to mentoring a new wave of advocates, passing on the torch through leadership retreats at the community center. These gatherings focused on Emily's nurturing legacy, sessions where participants learned to foster safe spaces for emotional expression, much like the older sister had created a haven of support for Madison during their shared routines. Attendees, often young leaders from diverse backgrounds, engaged in activities inspired by Madison's creative spark, such as collaborative art projects that turned personal struggles into shared narratives of growth. Sarah shared intimate recollections, like the evenings when Emily would read Madison's poems aloud, their voices blending in harmonious encouragement, are reminding everyone that small acts of affirmation could prevent the kind of silent resentments that had once built in Darius. These retreats produced ripple effects, graduates launching similar programs in their own communities, reducing youth isolation through proactive outreach, ensuring that the subtle signs of disconnection, glimpses of envy or withdrawal, were addressed with kindness rather than overlooked. The neighborhood, now a hub for such initiatives, thrived with intergenerational events, where elders and teens connected over stories, rebuilding the trust that had been tested but ultimately strengthened by the events of that fateful night. Psychological advancements in understanding such cases progressed with groundbreaking studies, where researchers used the Ridgewood narrative as a foundation for models on emotional resilience in adolescence. They explored how Darius's path, marked by escalating frustrations masked as casual detachment, highlighted the critical need for integrated support systems that caught vulnerabilities early, drawing parallels to the protective dynamic between the sisters. Sarah lent her voice to these studies, describing how Emily's intuitive empathy had often diffused Madison's minor worries, a bond now emulated in peer mentoring apps that paired users for supportive chats. These innovations spread rapidly, and with schools adopting them to create cultures of openness, reporting marked improvements in students' ability to navigate rejection without letting it fester into deeper divides. Friends of the sisters, united in their commitment, served as program ambassadors, recounting how Madison's joyful outlook had lifted group spirits during tough times, inspiring content that encouraged creative outlets for processing emotions. Media explorations of these developments framed the story as an evolving tale of hope, with in-depth features including Sarah's thoughtful insights on the healing power of remembrance, her words encouraging viewers to reflect on their own networks and intervene where shadows loomed. Darius's experience, anonymized for ethical teaching, became a cornerstone in professional training, illustrating that while some journeys ended in accountability's firm hand, proactive empathy could guide many more toward paths of mutual understanding and peace. Policy evolutions reached new heights as the Foundation's influence permeated international dialogues, with Sarah advising on global standards for youth emotional health that prioritized prevention over reaction. She evoked poignant images of the sisters' daily joys, Emily organizing neighborhood cleanups with her steady resolve, Madison adding fun twists that drew everyone in to underscore the value of community bonds in warding off isolation. Reforms materialized, collaborative agreements between nations funding accessible wellness resources inspired by the community center's success, where creative therapies mirrored Madison's artistic ways of coping. Annual international forums stemming from these efforts featured lantern processions symbolizing collective light, on gatherings where experts shared strategies honed from the case's lessons. Darius's mother, fully embracing her role in healing circles, contributed perspectives on family awareness, enriching conversations on supportive home environments. These policies built a safer world for young people, diminishing the quiet escalations of unrest through structured care, honoring Emily and Madison by ensuring their light prevented similar heartaches in countless lives. Sarah witnessed these changes with a profound sense of completion, each advancement a blooming tribute to her daughters, weaving their essence into the fabric of global progress. Personal threads of renewal continued to interlace as Sarah upheld traditions that bridged the past with the present. Family reunions featuring Emily's recipes shared with laughter, or creative nights dedicated to Madison's poetic flair, where loved ones crafted verses of gratitude. Grandchildren, growing in this nurturing legacy, embodied the sisters' values, their acts of kindness, a living continuation of the bond that had once lit up the Carter home. Community gestures amplified this warmth, a park bench inscribed with their names or annual scholarships awarded in their honor, drawing applications from aspiring helpers and creators. Sarah's quiet contemplations affirmed that grace endured, her sanctuary a place where memories danced like gentle flames, illuminating the journey from sorrow to serene acceptance. Cultural echoes resonated through diverse mediums, with creators producing works that celebrated the sisters' enduring joy, from animated shorts teaching empathy to symphonies composing melodies of unity. Sarah guided these with wisdom, ensuring they emphasized renewal, turning the narrative into a universal source of inspiration. As time's gentle current flowed, Sarah's presence remained a beacon of quiet strength, her story inspiring endless waves of positive change. In the heart of remembrance, the sisters' radiance held steady, a wellspring of grace for all. And in the soft glow of a shared lantern at a gathering's end, flames flickered in unity, a visual echo of two kindred spirits, casting eternal warmth into the embracing night. The eternal warmth cast by those kindred spirits enveloped the final chapters of a story that had begun in heartbreak but blossomed into a profound narrative of hope and renewal, where Emily and Madison Carter's legacies stood as timeless pillars of grace for all who followed. Sarah Carter, in the twilight of her remarkable journey, reflected on the full circle of healing as she authored her memoirs, a heartfelt chronicle that wove together the threads of loss, justice, and transformation. She detailed the sisters' everyday radiance, Emily's selfless acts, like organizing community drives that brought neighbors together in times of need, and Madison's vibrant creativity, her sketches and stories that turned ordinary moments into treasures of joy. These pages served not just as remembrance but as a guide for future generations, emphasizing how proactive empathy could intercept the silent buildups of resentment, much like those that had once shadowed Darius Hill's path. Published to wide acclaim, the book inspired reading groups worldwide, where participants discussed themes of forgiveness and prevention, sharing how the narrative prompted them to foster stronger bonds in their own lives. Sarah's final public appearances, gentle and wise, reinforced this message, her voice a soothing reminder that from the depths of tragedy, communities could emerge united, their shared light overpowering any lingering darkness. The Ridgewood Lane Community Center, now a national landmark, hosted launches and discussions, its halls echoing with laughter and reflection, a fitting tribute to the sisters who had once filled their home with such unbreakable warmth. Psychological closure came through comprehensive retrospectives, where experts compiled decades of data from the case to create holistic frameworks for emotional well-being, viewing Darius's story as a pivotal lesson in the power of early connection. They highlighted how the sisters' bond, Emily's guiding hand steadying Madison through life's small storms, modeled the kind of supportive relationships that could prevent isolation's grip. Sarah's input shaped these works, her anecdotes adding human depth, leading to widespread adoption of family therapy models that encouraged open dialogues on feelings of exclusion. Schools and organizations implemented these, reporting transformative outcomes. Young people learning to express vulnerabilities through creative means, echoing Madison's poetic outlets, and building resilience inspired by Emily's quiet strength. Friends of the sisters, their own lives rich with purpose, contributed endorsements, sharing how the events had spurred them to careers in helping others, perpetuating a cycle of positive influence. Media culminations, such as anniversary specials, celebrated these evolutions, featuring Sarah's serene reflections on justice's role, not just in accountability, but in sparking societal growth that honored the lost while protecting the living. Darius's endpoint, treated with thoughtful distance, underscored the narrative's core, that while some paths concluded in solemn finality, the broader story was one of hope, where lessons learned illuminated ways to nurture light in every young heart. Policy legacies solidified as the Foundation's work influenced enduring reforms, by establishing benchmarks for global youth support that prioritized compassion over correction. Sarah's final testimonies, delivered with poignant grace, evoked the sisters' simple joys, Madison's laughter during family games, Emily's thoughtful notes of encouragement to advocate for environments where every child felt seen and valued. These efforts culminated in international accords funding inclusive programs with community centers worldwide adopting the Ridgewood model, on blending emotional education with creative expression. Annual global remembrances, lit by symbolic lanterns, united diverse voices in commitment to prevention, honoring the light that had emerged from shadow. Darius's mother, having found peace in her own advocacy, stood as a symbol of reconciliation, her story intertwined with Sarah's in messages of shared humanity. These policies created lasting safeguards, ensuring that subtle undercurrents of unrest were met with waves of support, weaving the sisters' essence into the very structure of caring societies. Sarah, witnessing this from her peaceful haven, felt a deep fulfillment, each reform a blooming flower in the garden of memory, a testament to how love's persistence could reshape the world. Personal fulfillment bloomed in serene ways as Sarah surrounded herself with family traditions that kept the sisters eternally close, gatherings where Emily's recipes nourished bodies and souls. Ike and Madison's creative spirit inspired artistic expressions of gratitude. Grandchildren, embodying their great-aunt's kindness, carried these forward, their lives a living continuation of grace. Community tributes, gardens planted in their names, scholarships fostering dreams, ensured their light touched new horizons. Sarah's reflections affirmed that healing was an ongoing journey, her heart at peace, knowing joy had triumphed over sorrow. Cultural tributes reached their zenith, all with works across mediums celebrating the sisters' unbreakable bond, from symphonies of unity to stories of renewal that inspired millions. Sarah's guidance ensured these honored hope, turning the narrative into a universal embrace. In this culmination, as Sarah gazed at the horizon, she knew the story's true end was in its endless beginnings, the light of Emily and Madison forever guiding toward grace. Some crimes begin with cruelty, but they end with accountability. And sometimes, the loudest sound in a courtroom is the moment a smile finally disappears. And in the quiet close of a well-loved book, pages turned one last time, a visual echo of two sisters' smiles, fading into the warmth of eternal remembrance.